Good afternoon. Here we are again. We are continuing on with our Facebook Live series on the nuts and bolts of MassHealth. And this is part 4 of 4 parts. So if you missed the first 3, definitely go back and check out those videos. If you're wondering how to get notifications when we do Facebook Lives, you'll definitely want to make sure that you like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Ingle Law. I am Tracey Ingle, the principal of Ingle Law, where we are the probate puzzle people. We work with all of today's modern families to help them with their estate planning, with Medicaid issues, whatever the puzzles are that are unique to their family, we help them unravel them. So all of today's modern families are who we're working with. And again, this is a Facebook Live series that we're doing this week on the nuts and bolts of MassHealth and Medicaid. And specifically, a few days ago, we talked about, Medicare versus Medicaid and what the difference is, what they cover, what one covers, what the other covers, when they pay, when they don't pay. All right. Part 2 was looking at Medicaid to help pay for assisted living and home care. Very specific programs within the MassHealth Medicaid system, and they do cover some small amounts of home care and assisted living care, very specific rules for that program. So we talked about that in part 2. Yesterday, part 3, we talked about Medicare, MassHealth, even I do it, Medicaid, MassHealth to pay for nursing home stays. So that was yesterday's topic, what all the eligibility requirements are for that. So today in part 4, what we're talking about is applying for Medicaid, the actual application process, what to do if you get a denial, how to deal with that. And denials happen. They're nothing to panic about. So the actual application process, getting a denial, and then what to do after approval. Because here's the tip. Once you get that approval, you're not necessarily done. There's still things that have to be done after that. Okay. So just to give you an idea, I printed this out. This is an actual application. So to give you a sense, it's like 40 or 50 plus pages long. It all has to be filled out. And there's some questions in here that are confusing. They don't make a lot of sense. And you're answering questions about whoever is applying for the benefits. You're answering questions about that person's spouse. You're answering questions about people that might live with that applicant. So it's one of those applications that is created to be one application serves as many people as possible. And so it's really important to know which parts pertain to you and the applicant and which parts don't. So that's kind of one of the traps for the unwary that I tell folks about this application. And then the other thing about the application is that no matter what you say, no matter what you answer in this application, there has to be a piece of paper or some sort of proof, some sort of documentation that backs up whatever you've said. And those are what we refer to as verifications. So if you say, my name is Tracey Ingle and my date of birth is, I now need a birth certificate because that corroborates what I've said my date of birth is. So generally, this is what comes up a lot. Wherever you've got information in this application, you have to have corroborating data to back it up to prove that what you've said is correct. All right. And so that's where a lot of the heavy lifting comes in. Chasing down all that paperwork, that mountain of paperwork, can really be a nightmare. It's one of the things that we bring to the table for our clients is chasing it all down if they don't have easy access to it, particularly when you get to the section regarding assets and you have to disclose bank accounts, investment accounts, retirement accounts, life insurance policies. All of these assets have to be disclosed. And then there has to be documentation supporting the value. We can't just put numbers in the application and Medicaid accepts it. We have to back up all those numbers with documentation from the vendor, from the bank, from the insurance company, from the investment house, supporting everything that we're saying in this application. All right. So I know a lot of this stuff gets confusing. I want to offer you a resource here. Our MassHealthGuide.com. That's our MassHealth Nuts and Bolts Guide. We do talk a little bit about the application process in there. It's more geared toward all of the planning and eligibility, but there is some information about the application process. You can go ahead and download that. and that will certainly help you. So as I said, chasing down this verification, the Department of Medicaid is entitled to see anything having to do with your financial life going back 5 years from the date on the application. So that means for any bank account, for every investment account, you need to have 5 years worth of statements. All right. And that's true for all bank accounts that are open at the time you're applying, or any asset that existed in that 5-year window, even if it now no longer exists. So that can be a huge mountain of paperwork. And it's not unusual for us to have to box up applications versus stick them in an envelope. They do have to be mailed, ideally. You can fax applications in, but I can't imagine faxing, a 4-inch stack of paper. So oftentimes it's not unusual that we actually box up those applications. Once the application is filed, then usually within a couple or few weeks, you will receive back a request for additional information. And it may just be update a couple bank statements for us. You sent us bank statements through the end of September, but now it's, early November, we need to see the October bank statement. So sometimes it's that. Oftentimes it's explain various transactions to us. We want to see a lot of financial transactions. So any number of things can be in that request for information. And you have usually 21 days, 30 days to respond to that request for information. So it's important when you get envelopes from the Division of Medicaid, and they come from the state of Massachusetts. That's about the only way you'll know what they are, but you definitely want to pay attention to the mail, because by the time you've gotten them, it's not unusual for 5, 6, 8 days to have already passed. The computer generates it and gives you a due date 30 days out, but then it takes a couple days for it to get into an envelope, and then it takes another few days for the mail to get it to you, and now you've already lost a chunk of time. And so it's really important to pay attention to that mail and get that response in as soon as possible. Often that information request will also identify the caseworker that's working on your application. So if you have questions, there should be a direct dial phone number that you can give that person a call to ask for what you need, or to let them know where you're stumbling or having trouble. Okay. On those information requests, there's going to be a due date. Very important you get things in preferably the day before that due date. The reason being is by the time it gets delivered, it then needs to be opened and date stamped and work its way to the caseworker managing your application. That's going to take another day. Now you're on to the day after your due date. And by then the computer has already generated a denial for being late with the information. So pro tip, get your response in the day before, preferably. All right, but that brings me to our next point, which is dealing with denials, right? That's how easy it is to get a denial in the Medicaid process. You can submit your stuff in a timely fashion, and internally it takes them an extra day to get it where it needs to go. And by then a computer has already kicked out a denial. So denials happen. We coach our clients all the time, to expect denials. They're not the end of the world. They're not the end of the process. They're almost just the middle or part of the process. So if you get a denial, the denial comes with instructions on how to appeal it. And I recommend you appeal it as soon as possible. You have 30 days to file your appeal, but why take the risk? File the appeal as soon as possible. You don't want to risk that you forget or the mail gets delayed or something like that. So file that appeal as soon as possible. The instructions are in the denial letter. It's something that gets faxed to the Board of Hearings, who handles all of the appeals for the Department of Medicaid. They themselves work for the Department of Medicaid. It's an administrative process, but the Board of Hearings handles all the appeals. So you definitely want to file that as soon as possible. And then the appeal is it's very informal. It's yourself, it's a caseworker, and it's a hearing officer sitting in an office. Nowadays, we're doing them all via phone. And it's very informal, where the hearing is recorded and the hearing officer will ask, what's the issue? They'll talk to the caseworker. They'll, try to see, is it something we can just work out or get it fixed? Now, mind you, It's not unusual that everything gets resolved before that hearing. That happens all the time. We get, the paperwork just didn't get to the desk fast enough. The denial got kicked out. We filed the appeal. Meanwhile, you can still be working with the caseworker while the appeal is pending. And it's not unusual that the whole thing is resolved and the application approved 1 or 2 days before the actual hearing on the appeal. And then some paperwork is filed with the hearing officer to say, no, this has all been worked out. We're all set. And then the appeal doesn't need to go forward. And more often than not, that's how it happens. Now, certainly, if you have a bona fide legal issue, if there is, a real big problem here, then you're going to have your fair hearing. And if you're successful, then fine, yay, you're done. But if you're not, you can appeal further. And you can take that appeal to the Superior Court. It's called a 30A appeal because of the statute that you're using to file your appeal. And you can take it to Superior Court. That gets more complicated, a little more expensive. So it needs to be the right kind of issue that you want to take before the Superior Court. But more often than not, appeals are resolved prior to that hearing or at the hearing or shortly thereafter the hearing. And then you get your approval. And that's where everyone breathes a nice big sigh of relief. And now we have our approval, and then you can motor forward. There are some things, though, that you have to be aware of once you have your approval. So when you get that approval, it is going to calculate the amount that the applicant is responsible for paying, either as a deductible, if it's home and home-based care or assisted living, or if it's nursing home care, it's going to calculate how much that applicant is supposed to pay. It's what's called the patient pay amount or the private pay amount. We use both phrases. But it's going to calculate that PPA for how much that applicant is supposed to pay to the nursing home. Always important to double check that math. Always important to make sure that the Department of Medicaid has calculated it properly and they've used all the right numbers and all the right resources to calculate that. So that definitely needs to get checked. Then you want to make sure then the nursing home is going to actually get their bookkeeping caught up. And then you'll finally get a corrected invoice, because all along you'll have been getting invoices that just keep adding a month of care and a month of care and a month of care. It's a really stressful bill to look at every month and just have faith that it's going to work itself out. So the nursing home will finally be able to update their billing system and their bookkeeping, and then they will kick out a corrected invoice. Always important to double check that to make sure that fits with what you believe the proper numbers should be. Then going forward, the responsibility is just to pay the nursing home that monthly amount every month. And then notify the Department of Medicaid if there are changes. So the Department of Medicaid needs to be notified if income changes. Now, Social Security changes, they will pick up on. But if there are other significant or material changes in income, assets, care, whatever it is, the Department of Medicaid needs to be notified so that they can adjust things on their end. So certainly those updates to the ongoing unit, something to be aware of. If it's a married couple, shortly after the approval letter comes out, it is vital to make sure that assets are titled properly between the two spouses. Remember, we said the spouse in the nursing home can have $2,000 and the spouse at home can have $128,640. Well, if all the bank accounts are still titled jointly, you have to get that the spouse who's in the nursing home, that person's name has to come off those bank accounts. Otherwise, they have more than $2,000, right? So it's important to make sure all that titling gets taken care of and kept track of. And then that's a change that needs to be notified, needs to be sent to the Department of Medicaid so that they're notified that these assets have been retitled properly to fit the rules and regulations. And you only have a 90-day window after approval to get that done. And if you don't, guess what happens? A denial letter will kick out. And then you appeal it, and then you get your retitling done, and you show them you've done it, and lo and behold, everything will be reinstated again. So, and then finally, the last thing that happens is every year there is an eligibility review for whoever the applicant is. If it's a nursing home, if it's someone who's getting home care or assisted living, then it pertains to the married couple. But if it's someone in a nursing home on an annual basis, there is, I think it's just a one-page verification form where you plug in bank account information, prepaid burial or funeral information, if there is any life insurance outstanding, and then a bank statement. And they just want to see that the assets are still below $2,000. So that gets done on an annual basis. All right. Oh, that was a lot. And that's just the application process. That's not even talking about all the eligibility stuff that leads up to it. I am going to be talking about this in more detail on December 9th. We're doing a webinar, our MassHealth Nuts and Bolts webinar on December 9th at noon. And you can get more information about that at masshealthwebinar.com. Would love to see you there. It is going to be a live webinar. I will be there. I will be presenting a lot of the information that we talked about this week, information that's in the guide, but presented in a different way. And we will also be doing a live Q&A. I'll be giving a lot of examples, talking about the frequently asked questions that I get. And again, that is on December 9th at noon. And you can get more information at masshealthwebinar.com. And I would love to see you there. I'd love to answer your questions. It is an area, and, it's one of those areas where I hear a lot, oh, you're a lawyer. What do you know what the answer to this is? So I get those questions a lot, and there is a lot of misinformation out there. And my objective is to help you have the right information for your family. A lot of folks are going to be seeing family members at the holidays. If you are traveling, or maybe you're seeing them via Zoom, because that's the safe way to have the holidays this year. But you're going to notice big changes in our seniors and our elders. This year in particular has been very hard on them. Isolation is very hard on seniors. And you may start to think to yourself and wonder, how are we going to handle this next transition, and how are we going to afford to pay for it? And that's where this information comes in handy. I want you to have this information in the back of your mind so that you have the answers to the questions before the questions even come up. So would love to see you at our webinar, MassHealth Nuts and Bolts, on December 9th at noon. You can get more information at masshealthwebinar.com. Again, I am Tracey Ingle, the principal of Ingle Law, where we are the probate puzzle people, working with all of today's modern families on all things estate planning and elder law in a way that is smart, simple, and secure. And that's what I've got for today. And this wraps up our 4-part series. If you didn't see any of the earlier episodes, please feel free to check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/Ingle Law, and you can see those other videos as well. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of the day.